Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. The black ship hung silently in the void, a shadow among the stars. Its hull, forged from obsidian nanomaterial, absorbed light rather than reflecting it, giving the illusion that it was less a ship and more a tear in the fabric of space itself. The crew inside was anything but silent. Captain Elias Varon, a man whose sharp gaze could pierce through even the thickest layers of deception, stood at the center of the command deck. The holographic interface projected a sea of red alerts, critical failures, hull breaches, and, worst of all, the flashing indication of unauthorized boarding parties. It was chaos, and yet, there was an unshakable calm to him. "Status report," Elias barked, his voice a steel blade cutting through the cacophony. First Officer Renadalik, her dark hair tied in a tight braid, was already at her console, fingers flying across the controls. Her voice was brisk but steady, the voice of a soldier who'd seen more battles than most. "We've sustained structural damage across decks 5 through 7. External assault minimal, but the boarding team's 3 confirmed breaches, possibly 4. Reports indicate heavy armored hostiles, species unknown." Elias clenched his jaw. "And the crew? Scattered but holding their ground. Casualty count is climbing, though. They're hitting hard." Before Elias could respond, the black ship's AI, a sentient construct named Aegis, interjected. Its voice was smooth and authoritative, like a wise teacher who rarely raised its tone but always demanded respect. "Captain, I've detected a concentrated effort to disable key systems, reactor controls, life support, and the primary bridge. This is a coordinated assault." The captain's mind raced. A coordinated assault on this ship? That alone told him volumes about their attackers. They weren't pirates or opportunists. No, this was planned. Someone had studied them, their systems, their vulnerabilities, and they had sent in a strike team prepared to exploit every crack in their defenses. "Patch me through to the crew, shipwide," Elias said. Aegis complied, and within moments, his voice echoed through every corridor of the black ship. "This is Captain Varon. I know you're scared. I know the enemy is pushing us to our limits. But this is our ship, our home, and no one takes it from us. Regroup, coordinate, and fight with everything you've got. Let them know what it means to face humanity in its darkest hour." He cut the transmission and turned back to Rena. "Rear out security teams to secure the reactor core and life support systems. Lock down secondary access points. And tell engineering to prep the emergency overrides. If they want to shut us down, we'll make them bleed for every inch." Rena nodded and relayed the orders. The crew on the command deck moved with renewed urgency, galvanized by their captain's words. Elias turned to Aegis. "What do we know about the hostiles? Can you identify them?" "Working," Aegis replied. "Their armor is resistant to standard projectile weapons, though the kinetic impact is still effective. However, thermal and energy-based attacks are being absorbed almost entirely. I estimate their suits are powered by a compact energy source similar to our own arc reactors." Elias frowned. "Similar technology? That narrows it down. Cross-reference known adversaries." "I already have, Captain," Aegis replied. "No matches. Either they're a new player in this sector, or someone's been hiding their capabilities." A sharp tremor rocked the ship as another explosion tore through one of the lower decks. The lights flickered briefly before stabilizing. Rena's voice cut through the tense moment. "Deck 6 reports they've been overrun. They're falling back to the bulkhead near the armory." Elias slammed his fist against the edge of the console. Deck 6 was critical. It housed not only the ship's armory but also one of the main access routes to the reactor core. If the enemy reached that far, the fight would become exponentially harder. They couldn't allow it. "I'm heading down there," Elias announced, grabbing his sidearm from its holster. Rena stood abruptly. "Captain, you can't." "I can, and I will," Elias interrupted, his voice firm. "You've got the bridge, Rena. Hold it together. Aegis, I want real-time updates on their positions. Don't hold anything back." "Yes, Captain," Aegis responded. As Elias marched toward the lift, the command deck's energy shifted. The crew was more than just inspired, they were determined. If their captain was willing to step into the fray himself, they would fight twice as hard to ensure the black ship survived. The lift doors closed behind Elias, and the soft hum of descent filled the small compartment. He checked his sidearm, an old but reliable particle pistol, and glanced at the small badge pinned to his chest. A symbol of Earth's defiance, a reminder of all they'd fought for. When the doors slid open on Deck 6, the scene was chaos. Smoke billowed through the corridors, and the sound of gunfire echoed in the distance. But Elias didn't flinch. He raised his weapon, his eyes narrowing as he advanced into the fray. The black ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a testament to humanity's resilience, and Elias would be damned if he let anyone take it from them. The corridors of Deck 6 were a labyrinth of steel and shadows. Elias moved swiftly, boots silent against the metallic flooring. The dim lighting, flickering from damaged panels, gave the area an eerie glow, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch like reaching fingers. Smoke curled from ruptured conduits, and the air smelled of burnt ozone and sulfur, a sign that the intruders were making good on their threat. The hallway opened into a wider chamber, one of the access routes to the armory. As Elias rounded the corner, he saw them. Two armored figures standing over a fallen security officer, their bodies encased in heavy exoskeletons that gleamed with strange, alien materials. The armor was sleek, almost insectal, with jagged edges that reflected the low light. The figures hadn't noticed him yet. Elias wasted no time. He drew his particle pistol and, with a practiced motion, aimed for the vulnerable joint in the armored figure closest to him, the shoulder. The shot rang out, and the blast was like a small thunderclap. The figure recoiled as the impact hit, the armor around the shoulder joint crumpling under the sheer force of the blast. The enemy didn't go down, but they staggered, giving Elias the opening he needed. He advanced, rolling to the side as another blast of fire from the remaining enemy's rifle flew past him. The moment he was clear of the line of fire, he pressed his advantage. With fluid, almost predatory speed, he moved in close, using his strength to shove the injured figure into the wall. A quick twist of his wrist disabled their weapon. Before the second armored invader could react, Elias was already on top of them. With one fluid motion, he pressed the barrel of his pistol against the chest plate and fired. The blast was brutal, tearing through the armor and the systems that kept the suit running. The alien's body crumpled, but Elias wasn't focused on the fallen enemy. He was already moving forward, calculating the next move, scanning the hall for more threats. "Captain, status?" Rena's voice crackled in his earpiece, calm and steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. Elias didn't pause his forward momentum. Two down. No sign of others yet. "I'm pushing forward to secure the armory. I'll have reinforcements in your vicinity in 5 minutes, but be careful. The reports are coming in faster, there's a pattern. They're not just aiming to disable. They're trying to systematically shut down key systems to destabilize the entire ship. If they reach the reactor core—" "I know," Elias cut her off. "I'm not letting that happen. Keep me updated on the main corridors." The air grew colder as Elias approached the armory doors. They were reinforced, no doubt, but the enemy had already proven their ability to breach advanced security. He wasn't sure how much longer they'd last if the invaders pushed forward. He placed his hand on the door panel and keyed in the override code. A low hum filled the air, and with a soft hiss, the massive doors slowly slid open. Inside, the armory was a maze of weapons and munitions, sleek, high-tech weapons of war that could lay waste to entire planets. But there was something far more valuable within these walls: the ship's last line of defense. At the far end of the armory was a specialized chamber, one that held the emergency arsenal, the black ship's advanced combat drones, the kind that could level entire battalions. The doors were sealed with a separate security code, one that only Elias and Rena could override. "Rena," he said, voice tight with urgency, "I need you to activate the drones. We're outnumbered, and they're pushing hard. Open the emergency arsenal." There was a brief pause before Rena's voice came through, calm but tinged with concern. "I'm accessing the override now. Captain, you're not going to like this." The drones are offline. Someone's already tampered with the systems. Elias cursed under his breath. How long? I'm locking them down remotely, but it's going to take at least 15 minutes to bring them online. And that's if no one else is messing with the systems. The situation was deteriorating faster than he'd anticipated. 15 minutes. That was a lifetime in combat, especially when the enemy had already shown they could push forward relentlessly. The longer they waited, the more ground they'd lose. He needed to act, and fast. Elias stepped closer to the open vault, his mind racing as he scanned the room. The armory held plenty of conventional weapons, plasma rifles, grenade launchers, even experimental kinetic disruptors. But none of them would give him the edge he needed against an enemy that was clearly superior in armor and firepower. "Captain, stay focused," Rena said, her voice cutting through his thoughts. "There's another breach on Deck 8. The enemy is pushing toward the reactor core. We can't afford to split our forces. I've got a few squads inbound to your position, but I need you to hold the line." "I'll hold it." Elias checked the charge on his pistol, then reached for a high-powered plasma rifle hanging on the wall. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. "I'll make sure the armory's secure." As he moved toward the heavy blast doors leading into the rest of the ship's access routes, he felt a chill crawl up his spine. There was something strange about this fight. The invaders, with their advanced armor and tactical efficiency, didn't feel like just another enemy. They were organized. They were calculating. And that unnerved him. Every move they made seemed deliberate, a step-by-step effort to push the black ship to its breaking point. The black ship wasn't just a vessel. It was humanity's answer to the galaxy. And Elias would be damned if it was going to fall to anyone, especially not these silent invaders who had underestimated the human spirit. The moment the blast doors hissed open, Elias stepped forward, weapon raised, prepared for whatever came next. But what awaited him wasn't another wave of soldiers. It was a figure standing in the shadows, watching. It wasn't like the others. The alien was different, their silhouette more regal, more deliberate. And they didn't appear to be wearing armor. "Captain Varen," the figure said, their voice a low growl, resonating with a strange authority. "You are the last obstacle standing between us and the galaxy's future." Elias took a step forward, narrowing his eyes. "And you're the ones who've underestimated humanity." The figure in the shadows stood unmoving, their gaze fixed on Elias as if they were studying him like an insect beneath a magnifying glass. The low hum of the black ship systems was the only sound, but in the silence, Elias could feel the weight of the moment settle over him. This was no ordinary soldier, no standard invader. Whoever this person was, they carried an air of command, an aura of power that made the air around them feel charged. Elias held his ground, his grip tightening around the plasma rifle. He'd fought many enemies in his life, some more fearsome than others, but there was something different about this encounter. The way the figure stood, the cold confidence emanating from their stance, suggested they knew the black ship as intimately as he did. "You know," Elias said, his voice steady but laced with venom, "there's a fundamental mistake you've made. You think humanity is just another obstacle. But that's where you're wrong. We don't just fight to survive. We fight to win." The figure's lips twitched into the smallest of smirks. "You misunderstand, Captain Varen. This is not about survival. This is about order. The galaxy will not be ruled by the chaotic whims of your species." Elias narrowed his eyes, scanning the figure's every movement, looking for any sign of weakness, any chink in their metaphorical armor. They stood still, waiting for him to speak, to make his move. He didn't rush. Instead, he took a deliberate step forward, keeping the rifle aimed, but not firing yet. "You come to our home, to our ship, and you tell me about order?" Elias scoffed. "Who the hell are you to lecture me about order?" The figure stepped forward, and for the first time, Elias noticed the intricate details of their appearance. Their skin was a smooth, dark gray, almost metallic in texture, and their eyes, deep, glowing with an unnatural hue, were fixed firmly on him. They weren't human, that much was certain, but there was something disturbingly familiar about their presence, like they were more than just an enemy. They were a vision of something humanity could one day become, for better or worse. My name is Kayles, the figure finally spoke, their voice resonating in the narrow corridor. And I represent the coalition of ascendant species. Your species is a relic. Your time has passed, Captain. The galaxy has moved on. Elias tightened his jaw but said nothing. The name Kayles sounded familiar, though he couldn't place it. The coalition of ascendant species? He'd heard whispers of them. An alliance of powerful races that sought to impose their order on the galaxy, removing those they deemed unworthy. And humanity, of course, was at the top of that list. You've been watching us, haven't you? Elias said, his voice cold. Studying us, waiting for the right moment to strike. But you've underestimated us. Kayles's eyes flickered with amusement, as though the concept of being underestimated was laughable. Underestimate? No, Captain. You're not worthy of underestimation. You are a threat that must be dealt with swiftly and decisively. Humanity's ability to defy odds, to persist in the face of extinction. It is impressive, but ultimately futile. A surge of anger flared in Elias's chest, but he kept it contained, focusing on the mission at hand. If you think you're just going to waltz in here and take the black ship, you've got another thing coming. Kayles didn't flinch. In fact, they seemed almost bored. It is not the ship I seek. It is the weapon hidden within it. Elias's blood ran cold. Weapon? What the hell are you talking about? The black ship was never just a military vessel. Kayles continued, their voice darkening. It was designed as a repository, a vault of humanity's greatest weapon, the one that could truly shift the balance of power in the galaxy. Elias felt a knot form in his stomach. The black ship had always been more than a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's reach, its defiance against a galaxy that had always looked down on them. But there was something deeper, something that even he hadn't fully understood about the ship's true purpose. What weapon? Elias demanded, his voice now edged with concern. What could you possibly want with it? You've felt it, haven't you? Kayles asked, their voice almost a whisper now, but their eyes burning with intensity. The power buried deep within the black ship. You've been using it all along, and yet you don't fully understand it. That's why we've come. To take what you never knew you had. Elias's mind raced. His heart pounded as he thought back to the black ship's design. The strange anomalies they detected in its systems. The unexplained readings that had never been fully explained. He'd always assumed they were the result of experimental technologies. Nothing more than a product of the ship's complexity. But now, Kayles's words took on a new weight. What are you talking about? Elias asked again, his voice now firm with suspicion. What power? The figure known as Kayles stepped forward, closing the gap between them. For a moment, Elias thought they were going to attack. But instead, Kayles placed a hand on the wall, as though feeling the ship itself, connecting to its systems on a level Elias couldn't comprehend. The power to reshape the galaxy, Kayles murmured, the power to rule. The technology embedded in the core of your ship is more advanced than anything your species could possibly fathom. And I've come to claim it. Elias took a step back, his mind spinning. The black ship wasn't just a tool of war. It was a key to something far greater, something Kayles was desperate to control. This wasn't just about conquering humanity. It was about harnessing the ship's hidden potential and using it to dominate the galaxy. And Kayles wasn't alone in this pursuit. The invasion, the systematic assault on the black ship, it was all part of a larger plan. One that threatened everything humanity had fought for. But there was one thing Kayles had miscalculated. Elias Varon and the crew of the black ship weren't just going to hand over the keys to their future. They would fight to the last breath. We'll see about that, Elias said, his voice laced with resolve. Kayles smiled coldly, as though the outcome had already been decided. Yes, Captain. We shall see. Elias's mind churned, trying to process the weight of Kayles's words. The black ship, humanity's last bastion, its pride, was more than just a military vessel. It was a key to something beyond their understanding, something that could reshape the galaxy. And Kayles, with their chilling calm and alien knowledge, was here to take it. He had to act. This was no longer just a matter of defending the ship. It was a race to stop Kayles from unlocking whatever power the black ship harbored. "You're delusional," Elias said, his voice low but sharp, the anger in his chest building. "You think humanity has no idea what it's doing, that we're just stumbling through the galaxy. But you're wrong. We don't need your order. We've built this ship to fight back, to defy anyone who tries to control us. You'll never take what's ours." Kayles gave a small, almost imperceptible smile, the kind that suggested they weren't bothered by Elias's defiance. "Oh, I'm aware of your stubbornness, Captain. You humans always fight when you have nothing left to lose. But that's the thing, you're already losing." Elias gritted his teeth. "We'll see about that." The figure before him seemed to flicker in the dim light of the hallway, as if the shadows themselves were growing around Kayles. A moment later, Kayles's form shifted, their appearance rippling as though the fabric of reality itself was bending. Elias instinctively raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Kayles was gone. His breath hitched. The room felt colder, the air more oppressive. He was not alone. "Where are you?" Elias muttered, scanning the shadows, his senses on high alert. The hum of the ship's systems had become a distant backdrop to the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Something about this felt different. Kayles wasn't just another enemy commander. They were a threat on a different level, a being who understood things Elias couldn't even begin to fathom. A soft click echoed from behind him. Elias spun on his heel, weapon raised, but it was too late. A sharp, searing pain shot through his side as an energy blade, the kind used by highly advanced alien species, pierced his armor. He gritted his teeth, falling to one knee, but not before he caught a glimpse of the figure once more. Kayles was standing behind him, an energy blade ignited in their hand, glowing with an eerie blue light, but there was no malice in their eyes. Only inevitability. "You're strong, Captain. I'll give you that," Kayles said, their voice a soft murmur. "But even your resilience can't fight what's coming." With a swift motion, Kayles stepped back, their blade retracting. Elias took a sharp breath, the pain in his side intense but manageable. He had been in worse situations before. This was just another test. His hand clutched the side of his wound, but his eyes never left Kayles. "I'm not done yet," Elias snarled. "I still don't know what you're after, but I'll stop you before you get your hands on it." "Do you really think it's that simple?" Kayles asked, their tone almost patronizing. "This is bigger than you, Captain. You and your crew are insignificant in the grand scheme of things. The black ship is not a symbol of your species' strength. It is the anchor of your extinction. The galaxy's future will not be written by humans." The chill in the air seemed to intensify, and Elias felt the weight of Kayles's words pressing down on him. This wasn't just a battle for control, it was a war for the very fabric of existence. He wasn't just fighting for humanity's survival. He was fighting to stop something far older, far more powerful from being unleashed. Kayles took another step forward, their hand raised as though drawing the very ship's energy into their palm. Elias could feel the subtle hum of the ship's core, the pulse of the systems he had come to know so well vibrating under his feet. Kayles wasn't just speaking in metaphors. They were tapping into the black ship's essence, its core. They understood the power that resided within it. "No," Elias muttered, forcing himself to stand despite the pain. "I'm not going to let you control it." In that moment, he realized what had to be done. He didn't need to fight Kayles directly, not yet, anyway. What he needed was to stop them from accessing the ship's core. He had to deny Kayles control of whatever secret the black ship held, even if it meant sacrificing himself. His eyes flashed to the access panel on the far wall. It was a long shot, but if he could get to it, he could initiate a lockdown, severing Kayles's connection to the ship. But he was in no condition to run, not with Kayles standing between him and the panel. "Kayles!" Elias shouted, trying to buy time. "You think you're so special, don't you? You think you can just waltz in here and take control? Let me tell you something, humans don't bow to anyone. Not now, not ever. We fight, and we win. No matter how many times we're knocked down, Kaylee's expression didn't shift, but Elias could see the faintest flicker of something in their eyes. Was it doubt? Or was it just curiosity? You are persistent, Kaylee said slowly, as if tasting the words. But your resistance is nothing more than a delaying tactic. The black ship's power was never meant to be wielded by you. It was always meant for those who understand its potential. Then why did you wait? Elias asked, trying to keep Kaylee's distracted. Keep them talking. Why didn't you take it sooner? If you were so sure you could control it, you would have come for it long before now. Kaylee's seemed to consider this for a moment. Ah, you think this is about time? No, Captain. It's not about waiting. It's about readiness. The black ship, you needed to awaken the weapon inside. Humanity had to be tested. The time was never right until now. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Kaylee's wasn't just after the black ship's weapon. They were after the ship's power, its potential to unlock something. Humanity had triggered it, whether they knew it or not. And now it was too late. You've awakened it, Kaylee's murmured. And now you will regret it. With a swift motion, they reached out, and Elias felt a surge of energy slam into him, forcing him back. His vision blurred as the ship's lights flickered again. The connection between Kaylee's and the black ship was becoming stronger, the hum of the systems more intense. But it wasn't over yet. Elias took a deep breath, pushing past the pain. This wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. Not yet, he muttered under his breath, looking for an opening. You haven't won, and the fight was far from over. The air was thick with the crackling hum of energy, and the walls of the black ship seemed to pulse with an alien life of their own. Elias struggled to keep his footing as the pressure from Kaylee's power intensified. It felt as though the very fabric of the ship was being torn apart at the seams, the core itself responding to the alien's will. Every instinct in Elias screamed to act, to stop Kaylee's, to disrupt the connection between the invader and the ship before it was too late. But he was running out of time. The room swayed, his vision blurring as the energy coursed through the ship, tearing into the very systems that had once felt so familiar. The black ship was no longer just a vessel. It was a living, breathing thing, one that had been violated, forced to submit to Kaylee's will. You think you can fight it? Kaylee's voice echoed, their words dripping with disdain. This is not something your species can control. You're playing with forces beyond your understanding. Captain Varen. Elias gritted his teeth, pushing himself up despite the searing pain in his side. He couldn't let Kaylee's break him. Humanity wasn't a species that lay down and died. They fought. They always fought. You don't know us, Elias growled, his voice hoarse but full of defiance. You think you're better than us? But you've made one fatal mistake. Oh! Kaylee's eyes gleamed with an almost mocking curiosity. And what would that be? You think we're just a tool, a species to be ruled. But humanity doesn't follow orders. We make them. As if on cue, the ship's lights flickered again, brighter this time, almost blinding. A strange resonance hummed deep within the ship's core, growing louder by the second. For a split second, Elias thought he could hear the very voice of the black ship itself. A low, primal growl that seemed to echo through the bones of the vessel. And then, something extraordinary happened. Elias's mind began to connect with the ship. It wasn't a conscious decision, it was as if the black ship itself had reached out to him, offering him a link to its core systems. He felt an almost overwhelming flood of information, raw and unfiltered, pouring into his consciousness. The black ship wasn't just a weapon or a tool, it was alive, or at least it had the capacity for awareness. Kaylee's had been attempting to control it, but the ship had chosen Elias. The connection was sudden, violent, like an electric current surging through his veins. But rather than feeling overwhelmed, Elias's mind began to adapt, the flood of data slipping into place like gears in a well-oiled machine. It was as if the black ship's consciousness and his own had merged, briefly becoming one. He could feel the pulse of the reactor at the heart of the ship, the silent hum of the weapons systems, the neural network that connected the entire vessel. He understood now. The ship wasn't just a creation of mankind, it was an extension of humanity's will. a product of their ingenuity, their resilience. And Kaylee's couldn't control it. "You're making a mistake," Elias said, the words now tinged with a power he couldn't quite explain. His voice was no longer just his. It carried a resonance, a confidence that reverberated through the ship's corridors. "You think you're in control, but you're not. The black ship is mine. It's humanity's." Kaylee's froze for a moment, their posture shifting, sensing something was wrong. "Impossible," they muttered under their breath. You're connected to it." Elias's eyes locked with Kaylee's. "And that's the part you never understood. We built this. You thought you could control it, but it was always meant to be our weapon. A weapon of defiance, of survival." Kaylee's eyes widened in shock, realization dawning. You can't wield it like this." But it was too late. In that instant, Elias felt the full power of the black ship systems at his fingertips. He could feel the weapons charging, the drones activating, the defensive shields coming online with a roar of energy. He was no longer just captain of the black ship. He was its extension. His will flowed through its systems, an unspoken bond, as the ship itself seemed to respond to his command. "You're right," Elias said, his voice becoming low and commanding. "You can't wield it, but I can." Kaylee's lunged forward, but it was a futile move. The very floor beneath them seemed to shift as the ship's gravity adjusted to Elias's mental command. Kaylee stumbled, thrown off balance, as the corridor around them warped under the influence of the ship's systems responding to Elias's will. With a flick of his wrist, Elias sent a surge of energy blasting toward Kaylee's, a directed pulse of power that slammed into the invader with the force of a freight train. Kaylee's was thrown back, crashing into the wall, their body convulsing under the sheer intensity of the blast. The energy blade they had wielded flickered out, and they collapsed to the ground, their form crumpling in defeat. But Elias didn't stop there. He could feel the pulse of the ship's weapons, feel the surge of power that had been building within the black ship for years, waiting for the right moment. He was that moment. He reached out with his mind, pulling the ship's energy together, focusing it into a single concentrated force. The walls around him hummed with power, vibrating in response. Then, with a command, he unleashed the full force of the black ship's arsenal. A devastating shockwave of energy rippled outward, tearing through the ship's hull, cascading down corridors, and hitting the invaders' forces with an overwhelming force. The blast was so powerful, it sent tremors through the entire black ship, shaking it to its core. The energy was raw and untamed, but Elias could feel it. He could feel the ship's approval. And it was glorious. Kaylee's form writhed on the ground, their body smoking from the blast, their armor cracked and smoldering. They struggled to rise, but it was clear that their will was fading. The energy they had attempted to wield now returned to the black ship, redirected by Elias's command. "Do you see now?" Elias said, stepping forward, his voice cold and filled with power. "Humanity owns this ship. You'll never have it. You'll never control it." Kaylee's eyes flickered with pain and disbelief, their breath ragged. But even in the face of defeat, there was a strange smile on their lips. "This isn't over, Captain Varen," Kaylee's rasped. "You may have won today, but the galaxy is vast. And there are forces far greater than you can imagine, forces that will stop you from ever wielding this power again." Elias's grip on the ship's systems tightened. "I'm not worried about the galaxy," he said. "I'm worried about the people who think they can take what's ours. And that is where they make their mistake." The black ship rumbled beneath his feet as its systems returned to normal, the threat finally contained, for now. But Elias knew this was only the beginning. There were other forces, other threats lurking beyond the horizon. And humanity would be ready. The black ship hummed steadily as the energy that had surged through its systems began to dissipate. The sounds of the battle faded into the background as Elias stood in the center of the control room, his mind still connected to the ship's core. The weight of the victory was settling in, but there was no time to savor it. The galaxy was vast, and threats like Kaylee's weren't isolated incidents. The ship's sensors came to life, pinging with incoming messages, updates, and critical warnings. But one thing stood out: an emergency broadcast, flagged with urgency, from a familiar frequency. Elias's eyes narrowed as he activated the message, his heart sinking. "Captain Varen, this is Admiral Carrick. We've got a serious situation on our hands. We intercepted a signal from deep in the Outer Rim. It's from the Sovereignty, and they're rallying a fleet. If they're this far out, they're planning something major. We need to move, and we need to move now." Elias's thoughts immediately snapped back to reality. Carrick was one of the few officers he trusted implicitly, and if she was this worried, it was bad. "What's their fleet strength?" Elias asked, his voice low but steady as he keyed in the command to open a direct line. Carrick's voice crackled through the comms. "Tense. It's not just a fleet. They've allied with the Arcani Dominion, those psychics you've had trouble with before. We believe they've made a deal with the Ascendants to combine forces." Elias clenched his fists. The Ascendants, a race of mysterious, godlike beings, had long been a shadow over the galaxy. Their influence, though subtle, had been growing, and now they were aligning with the very powers humanity had been fighting against. The stakes had just escalated exponentially. "Understood," Elias replied, his voice hardening. "We're leaving immediately." With a series of commands, the black ship's massive engines roared to life, vibrating beneath Elias's feet. The crew had been shaken by the attack earlier, but they were resilient. Elias could feel their resolve through the ship's network as the crew scrambled to prepare for the next mission. They had already faced so much, and now they were heading straight into the heart of the storm. "Captain, we've got a problem," Lieutenant Mara, the ship's tactical officer, interrupted. Her voice was calm, but the tension was evident. "We've detected several large vessels moving toward the system. The Sovereignty fleet isn't just waiting around. They're advancing, and fast." Elias gritted his teeth. The Sovereignty was dangerous enough on its own, but with the Arcani Dominion and the Ascendants backing them, the odds were stacked against humanity. "Set course for the Outer Rim," Elias ordered. "We're not waiting for them to come to us." His mind raced, calculating strategies, drawing on every experience, every victory humanity had earned. The black ship was powerful, yes, but even it would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The only way to survive this was to hit hard and fast. "We need to take the initiative," Elias continued, pacing the command deck as the ship shifted into hyperdrive. "Get our interceptors ready. I want every pilot prepped and ready to deploy the moment we're in range." Mara's voice echoed through the comms. "Understood, Captain. We're ready." As the black ship tore through hyperspace, Elias leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. He couldn't afford to let the stress get to him. Not now. Humanity had already proved time and again that it could survive against impossible odds. But this was different. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a battle for the future of the galaxy itself. The ship's core hummed again, as though in response to his thoughts. Elias reached out with his mind, reconnecting to the ship. The bond between him and the black ship had grown deeper over the last few days, and now it felt as though he and the vessel were one. He could feel every movement, every pulse of energy, every shift in the ship's systems as if it were his own body. It was both empowering and overwhelming, and Elias knew that this connection could be their greatest asset, or their greatest vulnerability. "Captain," Mara's voice broke through his thoughts, "we're coming out of hyperspace in 5 seconds. The enemy fleet is right on top of us." "Steady," Elias said, his voice calm. "We're not backing down. This ends now." The black ship shuddered as it emerged from hyperspace, the vastness of the Outer Rim stretching before them. A fleet of enemy ships lay in wait, their dark hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. Sovereignty warships, their menacing forms surrounded by smaller Dominion vessels, all armed to the teeth. But something else caught Elias's attention. An eerie, glowing presence in the distance. "The Ascendants. They're here," Mara said softly. "Just like we feared." Elias's heart beat faster, but his resolve only hardened. He had faced enemies before, powerful, terrifying forces, but he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Humanity had come too far to let this be the end. "Deploy the fighters," Elias ordered. We engage on our terms. The black ship's hangar doors opened, and dozens of sleek, heavily armed starfighters shot out into space. The crew moved with practiced precision, locking into their positions and readying for the assault. Elias could feel their determination, their refusal to bow to the odds. Humanity had never been more united, more prepared for this battle. As the first wave of sovereignty ships advanced, Elias took a deep breath, reaching for the ship's controls. All hands, brace for impact. The black ship surged forward, weapons primed. The first enemy ship came into range, and Elias's mind synced with the ship, directing its energy with pinpoint accuracy. The ship's massive cannons roared to life, firing in rapid succession. Explosions erupted across the enemy fleet, the force of the blast shaking the black ship. But the enemy didn't flinch. They fought back with equal ferocity. "We're not backing down," Elias muttered, his eyes steely. "Let's show them what humanity is made of." The battle raged across the stars, with the black ship at its center. Elias's mind raced, every decision calculated, every movement deliberate. His crew fought with everything they had, their resolve unshakable, but the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. The Sovereignty's fleet, bolstered by the Ascendants and the Arcani Dominion, was relentless. As the ship maneuvered through enemy fire, Elias's thoughts raced ahead, formulating strategies, redirecting the ship's power, coordinating attacks. But even as the black ship inflicted heavy losses on the Sovereignty, it was clear that this was only the beginning. The Ascendant's psychic presence loomed ever larger, a constant pressure on Elias's mind. They weren't just fighting for dominance. They were playing a long game, one that Elias didn't fully understand yet. But he knew one thing: this was no ordinary battle. It was a war that would determine the future of humanity. And Elias Varen was ready to lead his people into the heart of it. The battlefield was a cacophony of fire and fury as the black ship and its fleet of fighters clashed with the overwhelming forces of the Sovereignty, the Arcani Dominion, and the Ascendants. The distant stars flickered like tiny beacons, their light swallowed by the violence of war. There was no time for hesitation, no time for doubt. Elias Varen's mind raced as he coordinated every movement, every strike, every defense with the precision of a master tactician. The black ship's cannons roared again, a volley of energy blasts ripping through the space in front of it, tearing into the Sovereignty fleet with devastating force. The ship had already sustained damage from earlier exchanges, but it had proven to be tougher than anyone had anticipated. Elias could feel it in his bones. The ship was alive, its core thrumming with power, responding to his commands with a synchrony that felt almost unnatural. But the Ascendants were still out there. That presence, an oppressive psychic force, hung over the battlefield like a storm cloud, watching, waiting, studying. Elias could feel their eyes on him, their mental tendrils probing his mind, seeking a crack, a weakness to exploit. They had been silent for the longest time, but he knew they were preparing for something. He just didn't know what. "We've lost contact with the forward fighters." Mara's voice cut through the comms, her tone tense. "They've engaged with the Dominion's warships, but there are too many of them. We're being outgunned." Elias glanced at the tactical display, watching as the fighters danced around the massive enemy ships, launching precision strikes, only to be overwhelmed by the sheer firepower. The black ship's sensors flickered as more Dominion vessels entered the fray, reinforcing their position. The odds were growing increasingly dire, but Elias couldn't afford to pull back. They had to hold their ground. This wasn't just a battle for the system. It was a battle for the future of humanity. "Reinforce their position," Elias commanded. "Launch the drones. Bring down those shields." As the black ship's hangars opened, the drones shot out in quick succession, swarming the enemy vessels with relentless fire. With each strike, the Sovereignty's warships staggered, their shields flickering and failing, their defensive systems failing to keep up with the barrage. But even as the tides of battle seemed to shift in humanity's favor, Elias knew the true threat had yet to show its face. The Ascendants were watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. "We can't keep this up," Mara said urgently. "Their fleet is too large. We're being overwhelmed on all fronts. We need a new plan, Captain. Elias's grip tightened on the ship's controls as he searched the battlefield. Every piece of data, every move was flashing before him in a blur. But one thing stood out, an opening in the enemy formation. The Ascendants were still hovering near the back, out of direct engagement, controlling the flow of the battle. They were pulling the strings, manipulating the forces around them. And Elias knew that if they weren't dealt with, humanity would lose this war before it had even begun. "We end this now," Elias said with deadly calm. He turned to Mara. "All remaining firepower, target the Ascendants." Full assault. Mara hesitated. "Captain, that's risky. The Ascendants are—" "Do it," Elias interrupted. "We take out their leadership and the rest of the fleet falls. Trust me, this is our only shot." There was a brief pause before Mara's voice came through, grim but resolute. "Understood. All units, lock on to Ascendant coordinates." Elias reached out with his mind, syncing with the black ship. He could feel the pulsing energy of its weapon systems, the hum of the reactor, the power surging through its every vein. He could feel the Ascendants, too, an alien presence, their minds vast and calculating, swirling in the chaos of the battlefield. He had to get to them before they could act. He pushed his own mind deeper into the ship's neural systems, directing the ship's power into a concentrated beam, one that would cut through the Ascendant forces with pinpoint accuracy. But as he did, something unexpected happened. A ripple of psychic energy slammed into him, overwhelming his senses in an instant. The Ascendants had sensed his move, and they were retaliating. For a moment, the black ship seemed to falter. The systems began to glitch, the control panels flashing erratically, as if the ship itself was trying to break free of the psychic pressure bearing down on it. Elias felt a burning headache form behind his eyes, his thoughts becoming muddled, disconnected. The Ascendants weren't just manipulating the battlefield, they were attacking his mind directly. "Captain!" Mara's voice was frantic, but Elias could barely hear her through the ringing in his ears. The pressure on his mind was intense, but he refused to break. Humanity had never been defined by its ability to surrender. They were survivors, no matter the odds. Elias grit his teeth, pushing back against the mental onslaught. With every ounce of his strength, he fought to hold onto his connection to the black ship, forcing his mind to sync with it even as the Ascendants tried to tear him apart. His fingers flew over the controls, directing the ship's weapons, launching volleys of missiles and energy blasts at the Ascendant fleet, even as his mind strained under their assault. But then, something changed. The connection he had with the black ship, once a mere extension of his will, became something more. It was no longer just him and the ship. It was humanity, a collective force, all of their strength, all of their ingenuity, all of their will, wrapped together in a singular, unbreakable bond. He could feel the presence of every soldier, every pilot, every person who had ever fought for humanity's survival. He felt their fire, their resolve, their belief that they could never be crushed. The Ascendants' pressure faltered, their hold weakening as the unity of humanity surged forward. And then, with a burst of energy, Elias pushed forward, sending a wave of psychic power surging through the black ship, breaking the Ascendants' hold. The black ship's cannons fired in unison, unleashing a concentrated blast at the Ascendants' position, hitting them with a force they had never anticipated. The psychic connection shattered, the Ascendants recoiling as their forces began to unravel. Their ships staggered, their control over the battle faltering as the tide turned. The fleet of the Sovereignty and Dominion began to break apart, their warships retreating, their will collapsing in the face of humanity's resistance. Elias watched as the battle shifted, the remaining enemy forces retreating into the depths of space. The black ship, battered and scarred, stood victorious in the midst of the chaos. "Status report," Elias said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion that weighed on him. "We've won," Mara replied, her voice full of awe. "The Ascendants are retreating, and the remaining Sovereignty forces are in full retreat. We've broken their will, Captain." Elias looked out across the battlefield, a deep, exhausted sigh escaping him. The war was far from over, But for the first time, humanity had truly struck a blow against the forces that had sought to crush them. "We've proven one thing today," Elias said, his voice firm with resolve. "Humanity will never be defeated. No matter how strong the enemy, no matter how many forces they send against us, we will fight. We will survive." And with that, the black ship, a symbol of humanity's defiance and strength, sailed on through the stars. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stellar HFY content. Ring that bell to stay updated, and we'll see you next time.